Go live now.
Hi, I'm Michael Mcdermott. I'm the co-founder and the director of the Black Earth Institute. We've been at this now since 2012. We were formed when Bush's second stolen election appeared to my then wife and co-founder Patricia Monahan to be terrible, and things, couldn't get worse. Well, they got a lot worse. The Institute was founded as a way for artists to respond to the issues of spirituality, the earth, and social justice, and the interconnection of those. We are now on our 6th cohort of new fellows. We expanded it to 13. I've been receiving project proposals from people that are just stunning, and building a community like this, that people have a little bit of a common vision and a common goal of making this a better world. As far as the Black Earth Institute is concerned, we've had Native fellows since the beginning. We've had 2 issues of our journal, including this past one. Allison Hitchcock edited this one along with the assistance of Jasmine and Katie. So we've tried to pay attention to those issues, and we feel very hopeful that we're able to form a community that through their art will be responding to the issues of our time. Black Earth is located in Black Earth Institute is Black Earth, Wisconsin, land of largely the Ho-Chunk that were cleared largely before people settled here. Was totally disrupted by mining, miners coming from that rotten state of Illinois, and totally disrupting things, leading to the Black Hawk War. And so that's something that we remember. We've gone, when we've had our annual retreat, we've actually gone to the battle site and met with relatives of Black Hawk. So we try to pay attention to those things. But I don't want to go on. I think there's people here to read, and I'm going to be quiet for the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, Michael. So hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Katie Gurin. I am the assistant editor, along with Jasmine Smith, of the Navigations issue of About Place Journal, and I'm speaking to you from the unceded ancestral territory of the Wiyot tribe. Jasmine and I would like to offer a few ways for allies to work toward justice for Indigenous peoples, including supporting Indigenous organizations with your time or resources, supporting Indigenous-led campaigns and initiatives, and returning land. So you can return land as an individual or work through your state, local, federal government to on that effort. So this issue of About Place Journal was guided by the need, as Allison articulated in the call for work, to find the currents and pathways that deliver us to intentional ways of being from the calamitous footprints colonial industry lays. With Allison's direction, the editorial team featured artists and writers who were engaging with the essence of sacred spaces and intentional navigations to protect, preserve, and enhance by return to traditional ecological knowledge. We also welcomed work from those who are able to locate solace and solution in other ways. As Allison puts it, we sought contributors who find possibilities beyond systems and movements configured from dominant colonial mindedness. I want to extend my deep gratitude to Allison Hedgecoke for developing the vision for this issue and for her work as a writer, educator, and activist. For those of you who aren't familiar with Allison, and I just want to reiterate again just how much she's accomplished. Allison is a Fulbright Scholar and U.S. Library of Congress Witter Bidder Fellow. Allison began teaching following former fieldworker retraining in Santa Paula and Ventura in the mid-1980s, and she is now a distinguished professor of creative writing at the University of California, Riverside. She's written 7 books of poetry, 1 book of nonfiction, and a play. Her most recent book of poetry, Look at This Blue, was released from Coffee House Press this year, and I urge you to pick up a copy. I also want to thank Jasmine Elizabeth Smith, who did a lot of the behind the scenes work to organize and promote this event. and who is one of the most brilliant and inspiring people I know. Jasmine has also recently released a gorgeous full-length collection of poems, South Flight, from University of Georgia Press. South Flight was a finalist for the National Book Award and was selected by Ilya Kaminsky for the Georgia Poetry Prize. Jasmine's poetic work has been featured in Black Renaissance Noir, Poetry, Terrain's Letter to America anthology, World Literature Today, and other publications. Smith is a Cave Canem Fellow, the poetry editor and poetry program specialist for the Black Lights Art Collective, and a co-host of the radio show Baby Poet. She currently teaches language arts and creative writing. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first reader. So Elmaz Abinader is, her recent work has appeared in Minding Nature, Mizna, and the anthology Essential Truths. Her poetry collection, This House, My Bones, was the editor's selection of 2014 from Willow Books. She has a memoir, Children of the Rujni, A Family's Journey from Lebanon, and a book of poetry, In the Country of My Dreams, which is the winner of PEN Oakland. Elmaz is co-founder of the Voices of Our Nation Arts Foundation, VONA, or Voices, and she teaches at Mills College. Please welcome Elmaz.
All right, thank you for having me. I appreciate, first of all, thank you to Allison and Jasmine and Katie for including me in this beautiful journal. Thank you to Michael for your incredible vision, and Emily for running the behind the scenes. I know this is hard work to do. I'm going to give you 3 poems today. They're very different in tone. Basically, I believe that we have a cellular connection to the earth, and that everything we do shifts both our cells and the cells of the earth. And that means invasions, occupations, plantings, everything. So I'm going to start with a poem called Prayer for My Garden. It's based on the idea of people planting victory gardens during World War II. They were building victory gardens to kind of raise hope for the victory of World War II. And I have a very different take on victory gardens here. Prayer for my garden. If I grew a victory garden for today, I'd seed it with tears. Not the sweet, sorry ones, but the sweat beads of my anger. Grow eucalyptus and camphor to harden my voice, evacuate my airwaves. The starter plants, vines of words, I'd sink deep into the soil, down into the loamy places. Well, I will harvest declarations and manifestos, resistances to brutality and excuses. The compost is the miscegenation of history, of racism and violence, mixed well with the cries of those whose deaths have not been spoken. Its special smoke fertilizes incentive to shout their eulogies to the sky. My garden remembers everyone. Plots speared with name tags: George, Brianna, Ahmed, Tony, a new crop every season. I am tired of these mornings, this bitter harvest. These are grounds of ash and fire, smoldering and enraging history. Clear the grounds, make the soil new, grow love as it burns. The second poem I'm offering is a poem that was included in the journal. It was included in a very beautiful section about gratitude and going forward. And it's actually about, it's a love story, both a love story to the movement of the earth and the movement of a relationship. And it's called Seismic Shifts. And I want to talk about the setup a little bit. Down the left column are the movements of the earth, and the right side is the narrative of the relationship. So it's a little different to read than it is to look at. Smoke. I smell coffee in your mouth. You use my body lotion, almond. Eruption. Driving alone, my heart races. I call you. It's a warning, it's a surprise. Overwhelming, I say. Cicadas. Families bring baskets of food and then more. We eat with our fingers and our laughing clears our lips. Night. 5 days before his death, you prayed with my father, snapped a poem when he put on his blue hat. Fog. We keep finding stories we haven't told each other. Repeat the ones we know. Thunder. I count the booms, the seconds before the lightning, and the time it takes for you to drive from work to home. Tide. I can't get my bearings when hours sink me into the couch. I stretch toward you, leaning back in the soft armchair. Growth. I shave the back of your neck to clean. You fold clothes and place them on my bed. Topography. Your identifiable marks are contemplation and patience. I'd know you anywhere. Dawn. You can name the places I have traveled without you and with you. We lust wonder. Dusk. You don't ask, when will you be finished? You remove the cold cup of tea, dump the wilted bag. Humidity. Your fine hairs float into pinwheels in the sink, and in bed you regulate me to warm. Night. You have prayers. I have storytellers. You live grateful. I sleep peacefully. River. We have rituals we haven't done before. Old in love, muddied in the heart, on to the sea. And here's my final poem. I read this poem a lot because I think it makes an important point about how we affect the earth. And it's based on my love of maps, paper maps, the kind that you fold out and you can't fold back together, or you fold back together and it cuts right where you need to see the city or the road, and so you lose it. And so I wrote this poem about the apartheid wall in Palestine. But it starts in southwestern Pennsylvania, where I grew up, in a very weird place, but when I look back at it, a very privileged place. The poem is called Climb Up and Over. Our garden bordered an alley which crossed into a hayfield and stretched to a hillside. Our yard had lilacs that surrounded a pond filled with sweet peas and crested by vines. Our porch led to a street that lined the road running from our house all the way to West Virginia. And we walked from one house to Neff Woods, from another to the waterfall across the bridge. The coal mining corner of Pennsylvania, with all its faults, let cows chew from this neighbor to the next, and children crossed yards that were not theirs to get to school, or sit on the steps of a neighbor's porch without asking. And we didn't know this was belonging. This was Pennsylvania, and not Abu Dis, where a wall was erected right down Main Street, keeping the kids away from the school they've been going to their whole lives. So what do? They wonder, like the farmers of Azun, whose vegetable fields, olive trees, are out of reach, who stare at 25 feet of stone and wire, guarding them from their own food as a security measure that forces a 4-kilometer walk to get into a gate that gives them 20 minutes to slip over to the other side for bushels of barley to take home, if it's still there. Or if you live in the Anata district in East Jerusalem, it's probably not. Some things had to move to make room for the wall, and without your home, everyone is more secure. The landscape is sliced and the lands are carved and contained. I have studied maps. The blue waters and the green mountains, yellow countries, and red ones all meant something to the cartographers, and I followed them. A puzzle of colors explained in the legend in the corner that said, this was the earth. Lakes, mountains, cliffs, buttes, highways, hiking trails, one-way streets, capitals, borders, mileage counters, oceans, rivers snaking through states and countries, ranges peaking across the Urals, frozen tundra, pampas, veldt, thickly populated cities, railroad tracks. I run my finger along each symbol, each road designation, each color, each touchstone. How do you mark a barrier? Make it part of the landscape. What is the symbol of restraint? What is the color of confinement, disruption, loss, and separation? Of sorrow? How do you hold the pen? Diagram the atlas, sketch the captivity. Do not draw the wall of the great march to liberation. Just mark a slow death to the earth that inhabits it and the people who make it home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elnaz. That was amazing. So our next reader is Juan Morales, who is the son of an Ecuadorian mother and a Puerto Rican father. He is the author of 3 poetry collections, including The Handyman's Guide to End Times, winner of the 2019 International Latino Book Award. Recent poems have appeared in Crazy Horse, The Laurel Review, Breakbeats Volume 4 Latinx, Acentos Review, Collateral, Terrain.org, Pank, and Poetry. He is a Contamundo Fellow, a Macondo Fellow, the editor-publisher of Pilgrimage Press, and professor of English and the Associate Dean of the College of Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences at Colorado State University, Pueblo. Please welcome Juan.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It's a real honor to have the poems in this wonderful issue of About Place Journal and to support and collaborate with the Black Earth Institute, which continues to do phenomenal work. And thanks to the MCs, the hosts, and everyone else and my fellow readers. It's cool to be here. So I'm looking at the clock, and I'm just gonna read the 3 poems that are in that I was fortunate to have in the issue. And they're all from a new book that I'm working on. They're these kind of weird humorous elegies and these little sueñitos, as I'm calling them, these little dreams. And they kind of all center around the passing of my father. But 2 of the 3 that I'm reading today are just these random dream poems. And I'm going to read them backwards because it just seems like the right thing to do today. Actualization principle. At Lago Muerte, the fishermen calmly cast out their lines, reeling in very tiny fish. I felt out of place because I forgot my pole. When I looked closer, the lake was an empty plain filled with dried logs and rocks. I could barely make out the line where the waves once slapped. One of the fishermen turned to me. "This is an impossible feeling," he said, as he tugged another glistening one out of the lake. The fish tried to breathe and stared past me. "Everything is nonsense, but you can't help but feel lucky." He resumed fishing. Afraid of being hooked by one of them, I backed up. I started telling them about the time I hooked my thumb all the way through, but they stopped me because I had already told them. All right, second poem. It's called If the Octopus Dreams. If the octopus dreams. In this viral video, the octopus sleeps in the black along the top of the water, suctioned to her tank's glass walls. Her reflection is slow ripples. At first, she's a placated white like pristine glaciers that have avoided pollution. The texture roughens, spiky as the fragile coral reef that breathes brown, yellow, and gray. When head twitches, she clouds into the red, purple, and black until transitioning to a gray that surrenders to yellow. Her head and eyes waver but remain shut. Somewhere in its dance of color, I saw a Martian landscape appear. A cloud of harsh storm, and then back to the peaceful swivel and drift of clouds that bounces on the water's surface. The scientists report it is unlikely to be octopus dreams, but instead of worrying, I accept all invitations to be submerged. Okay, so we're just zooming along on Zoom here and YouTube Live. My last poem is called Of Deer or Los Venados, and it's a poem about it's a poem dedicated to my mother and about my mother. She lives in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and just this week she was talking about all the deer that are in her yard and how cool they are. So that's like a cool nature poem. Of deer or Los Venados. Mom is happy when the deer, Los Venados, hop the chain link fence and graze in her yard. There's usually 3 does and 1 buck with strong antlers. Yesterday, they rested in the shade of the house. She stood 2 feet away but could not bring herself to touch the closest doe. Of course, our family wonders if the buck is you, Pop, coming to show Mom that she is not alone. Meanwhile, I am mixed up in dreams, a son trying to find a lost father and a mother he fears losing too. I live 40 minutes away from her, which might as well be a moon or a planet away. When I cannot call, I send love, hoping it transcends and bends time deep into the dreamscape where we find you in your branches of horns touching the sky and Mom, now standing next to you with her hand that rests tenderly on your neck. Cool. Thanks for having me. I look forward to hearing the rest of the reading and the great conversation.
Thank you so much. So our next reader is Ricardo Gonzalez Rothi. Ricardo has had his fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry featured in the US and in the UK. Born and raised in Cuba, he came to the United States as a refugee in his teens. He has had several published narrative essays about growing up in Cuba, which have appeared in Acentos Review, Heel Literary Journal, Gainesville Magazine, BioStories, Foliate Oak, Lunch Ticket, and the Bellingham Review. Ricardo has had a lot of poetry published, and it's an overwhelming amount. And I won't share all of it with you, but please do visit the About Place website to check it out. And not only has Ricardo had a lot of literary work published, but he's also published quite a bit as an academic physician and scientific writer. So in that capacity, Ricardo has authored over 50 scientific journals, which were published in nationally and internationally peer-reviewed and read journals. So thank you so much for being with us, Ricardo.
Thank you, Katie. You're making me blush. Wow, I want to thank the Black Earth Institute and this About Place Journal, because it's really a fascinating enterprise. And Michael, I thank you. Following Elmaz and Juan is going to be a tough one, but I'll give it a go. It's December, and I'm sitting on a stump beside the current on a gentle bend on the Santa Fe River near my home in North Florida. Lily pads like emerald clusters dot the shallow edges where the water courses lazily over the lime rock bottom. The water looks like clear tea. The leach tannin from the cypress roots gives the river that golden, brown, almost magic hue. The river is spring-fed, so the water temperature is 72 degrees all year round. I dip my fingers in the water. After a while, a dull hush of the gentle current lulls me into thinking that I'm the only one there. But the water skimmers flittering around the fallen logs say otherwise, and a great blue heron awaits in stealth for an errant fingerling bass to have an attention lapse that will lead to its demise, succumbing to the flick of the bird's sharp stab and swallow. An osprey comes scanning upriver, majestic but unpretentious, searching for his meal. Turtles sunning themselves on a partially submerged log mid-river plop in tandem to the water at the sight of the predator's flyby. Now and then a remote voice and a distant thud of a paddle striking the gunnels on a kayak is about the only other human presence here now. A fish breaks the surface upriver. It's hard to believe that a week ago it was below zero here. Today, it is overcast and almost balmy, and a slight breeze bristles the naked branches on the trees at the river's edge. Another year has gone by. They say that getting old has its rewards. Nothing like having lots of remember whens under one's belt. To know the river doesn't seem to care much about the passage of time. It just runs, and the seasons change, and the leaves fall, and then they come out again in the spring to adorn its banks. Some people notice. It's difficult, if not impossible, to not sense a holiness as I sit here in silence. The cypress knees, like spent candlesticks, dot the banks of the river, and mossy rotting logs bridge some of the boulders at the bend. Two great wings splay gracefully about a quarter of a mile downstream, and a giant heron lands spectacularly upon a grassy land on the shallows. All is water. The simple serenity of it all. The millions of droplets of dew that it would take to converge to form such a watery expanse are unimaginable to me, but they're not taken for granted. All of it will flow into the Suwannee River and down to the Gulf of Mexico, and then to touch other Earth oceans. Halfway across the Atlantic and near the Arctic Circle, at the crack of Silfra, just beyond Reykjavik, Iceland, melted glacier water seeps through volcanic rock to fill the craggy fissure formed by earthquakes, which once caused the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates to rift and form what is now the continental shelf. The meeting of the two continents was thus disrupted in the 1700s, and the gap at Silfra continues to widen about 2 centimeters every year. Silfra is no Santa Fe River. It takes its water from glacial melts 100 years of slow seep before the water reaches the spring that feeds the rift. I was there one summer, floating face down in a dry suit with a water temperature of 35 degrees Fahrenheit. I marveled at the blue bottom through my mask, the sunlight piercing the water as the light beams lost themselves in the indigo depths. Who knows how deep into the entrails of the earth? This is the last day of December, another year gone by. I suppose my yellow pad has page limits. It would be hard to fit all these thoughts on one pad and to have sufficient hubris to think that I can remember every event of every second I have lived in and write it down in time. But here comes a great white heron, which just landed mid-river after a flicker of wings and an elegant descent. As it stands in stillness there, looks down at the water, then towards me, as if maybe it knows something I don't know. Is this my exit? Will I be able to even finish this sentence? That's how fragile my time feels these days. The river has exempted me from all intrusions, as has Silfra. I, in turn, give the waters my thanks and reverence for allowing me to interrupt them in their holy moments of being, so that I could feel, touch, see, and hear them. No greater gift is mine than this, to know that the waters of Silfra and the Santa Fe will meet somewhere in the Atlantic and will eventually blend, so I can rest assured that my spirit will always be in both places at the same time.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. That was beautiful. Our next reader is Abigail Chebetnoy, who is the author of In the Current Where Drowning is Beautiful, which is forthcoming from Wesleyan Press. The Line-A-Cut illustrated chapbook Converging Lines of Light, which was published by Flower Press in 2021, and How to Dress a Fish, which was published by Wesleyan in 2019. How to Dress a Fish was shortlisted for the 2020 International Griffin Prize for Poetry and was the winner of the 2020 Colorado Book Award. Abigail's poems have appeared in Hayden's Ferry Review, Boston Review, Tin House, Gulf Coast, Lit Hub, Red Ink, and others. She is a member of the Tinirnuk Native Village in Kodiak and currently teaches at the Institute of American Indian Arts and Eastern Oregon University's low residency MFA program. She also teaches at the Lighthouse Writers Workshop in Denver. Thank you so much for being here with us, Abigail.
Shemai, Kayana, thank you so much, Katie and Jasmine and Michael. It's incredible to be here with such wonderful voices, and just as Ricardo lamented following such great readers, to follow such an emotional piece. Oh, I'll do my best. The work I'm reading from today is from some newer work I've started since becoming a mother and recognizing that I need to perhaps get better at locating some hope, as well as a recognition of violence and the work to be done. And so really excited to hear Juan's dream work poems, as it's certainly something I've come to play with as well. This first poem is called Foxhole Disambiguated. We make mountains in the rubble. Having cleared those we were given, cut the sky from our feet. We knew how to swim once. Must every daily sighting become ordinary? The deer, the elk, the canary, the fox. These days, I am only stopped by predators along the highway, on power lines and in fields for selling. Maybe there were 3 of us. Maybe there were 300. They told us we needed seeding. I have a slip of sand from a home I don't carry when I'm travel. This too will be taken. This too buried. Take instead the smooth white stone that could be axe or back, scavenged from the guarded beach. Maybe a tooth. Always a tooth. I am writing them into the surface like a skin, because the truth is the stone I carry is too soft and shiftless. There were more in the water, there were others, but I shied from the weight. Enough to bring small wings down, the body a risk, soft under pressure. I'm trying to tell you a red sky is a sign you know instinctively. Still, we believe in mountains, insist on their promise. In every falling story, we survive the higher ground. Still, we dig up teeth. Still, we plant the seed, insist we will grow. And the other one I'm going to read today is called How We Break. And I'm really interested in relationships and questions that emerge out of context and in juxtaposition, sort of taking for granted assumptions of meaning and usual sort of colonizer logic. So, How We Break. In the fog, the outline, in the island, in the earth, wherein my kin dwell well with holes, fox and gaping, present mortars, ringing window, shards and red salt, pocked brick working the emptied block. Siege the day. Sometimes the cards are warning. The crows not what they seem, and naturally the ravens, the brass eagles young enough to be golden. From feels like this molting, this body stone slipping, silk string from string and sinking, but for the water pulling from these shores. Line bolt after body after beam on the beach and count the dead. In the records, in the time that comes of flooding, turn the body garment, hung and carried to light in the hostelum of the eclipse. Dust collects, catches to wet sand through small fingers, slipping, cut from the boat. Child, my ark, would you believe me? The point is how I love. Koyana, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abigail. Our next reader is Victoria Hurtada Angulo, who has come here to tell you something, whether it means something or not. After a great deal of walking and creating lists and baking goods for loved ones, this space in which Victoria reads is now after hours space, to sit pondering on mortality, love, and bold human wonder. In Victoria's work, one can hear screams in the quietest of things. She is known as an active member in our art community, where she participates and orchestrates art shows and open mics. Victoria has been a featured reader at events, held lectures for independent poetry workshops, published poetry, and has also co-founded the Art of Nothing Press publication for poetry and art. Thank you so much for being with us, Victoria.
Thank you all for having me. All of these poems so far, I'm in awe. Okay, so I have 3 poems that I'll read today, 2 of which have been published here, and the last is something very recent. So to start off, my statement is, my work celebrates all that can breathe and speaks unnoticed. If something should die, murder for botany. Soil to say, watch out, I might take out your breeding tongue, the swelled sex and belted memories. You deserve to be reborn, the holistic and blessing, to take life away as my own prayer, the earth and the gamey flooding. If you continue to walk the streets stirring madness, I am inclined to slit your identity and grassfield you to goodness. I miss playing, playground jubilee and sticky hand games, holding each other, candied laughter, and holding up. Earth, if I spit in your eye, you may see God, cutie pie newborn stetch, a savory delicacy. Ruptured bathing, I sing you stray away songs. Lucid seeming into sunlight, linen hugging. I will birth love for you, stranger, from nothing before the earth dies. Offer yourself, no body to sway, for holy 24-hour flies, soil to say. All right, and this next poem is Untitled. I think this was more of observational poem based on something that doesn't usually happen, which is you decide to stay up all night and just watch the sky turn to a dawn. And I think that's something that's not given to us often. So I want to write about it. I saw the world in one take, wide-eyed, jungle, quiet time. It's been years since I've watched the sunrise, if there ever was one. I watched the moonlight put spotlight on all the trees, bushes, branches. Intimate, I could kiss it. The beautiful thing about watching the sunrise is hearing your brother giggle in his sleep, and every time you blink, the sky brightens. I've seen blue only 3 times like this, and it makes my bones hurt. There was one moment where I thought I was gonna bleed out there. I'll always feel this content when I think I'm about to die, maybe. I'm hungry, but responsible for listening to the chirps outside now. The blue outside, and how sounds the silences behind those birds, a play on color and a play on living. This is any space. This is where I'd like to die. I've fallen in love with living again. This time, please let it stay longer. All right, and this last poem is also untitled, so I just keep going with the untitled stuff. Sometimes I think about him, how long it took for him to warm up to me, to tell me what songs has been his favorite, to care for me, to not care for me. I pluck the weeds, dried mulch, 100 degrees feels like the sun does not know how to mother someone like me. Plants very much living. The lilies are dead, but they'll grow back. A tumultuous argument. I don't think anyone really gets me, especially how I try to tell everyone I'm depressed. Plucking weeds and even the new growth, I sometimes do it on purpose. Take away life from pure human anger, seeing how I can change the existence of something just because I don't like mine. I don't like hard work sometimes. Building from underneath the soil, the critters, carcasses, they're all pissed at me for trying to help them change, to pass away, and turn into beauty, something grown. I think of her and him, and it comes back again, mindlessly pulling at the life and helping those dying pass in the wrong ways, the wrong plants. I feel like I've never known her. She'll never know me. Mothers are a construct. My frustration with gardening is my mother. I take moments to lie next to her and hear my mother tells me it's okay by crawling in my ears and causing an infection, swell to the brain and leading death. Die by nurture, brought by nature, confused. I don't deserve to be pointed at and force sadness into me. They say I don't understand, yet I pour my eyes into earth and wait for them to speak. I sit here without words, intensely listening, something mothers crochet to trait and DNA. I'm not an idiot for trusting myself. I'm not a liar for knowing what I deserve. I died on sight. Everyone, them, they saw that happen. Plucked away from the planet like a piece mistaken as a weed, gone knowingly, like it wasn't a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Our next reader is Remy Recchia, who is a trans poet and essayist from Kalamazoo, Michigan. He's a PhD candidate in creative writing at Oklahoma State University, and he currently serves as an associate editor for Cimarron Review and the reviews editor for Gasher. A 4-time Pushcart Prize nominee, Remy's work has appeared or will appear in Best New Poets 2021, Columbia Online Journal, Harper Palette, World Literature Today, and Juked, among others. He holds an MFA in poetry from Bowling Green State University. Remy is the author of Quicksand, Stargazing from Cooper Dillon Books, and Sober from Redbird Chapbooks. Thank you, Remy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a delight to hear everyone read. This poem is dedicated to Oklahoma, and the title is Struck by the Beauty of Someplace I Don't Belong, I Slow Down and Drive the Speed Limit. A lake unfurling under the bridge, my small foot on the gas pedal propelling me across the bridge. Tiny dinosaurs and red-tailed hawks threatening to land on the bridge. Depleted serotonin asking spotty neurotransmitters to please plummet off the bridge. My slender hands around the steering wheel, tapping along to the radio on the bridge. Injection site, alive and tender and on fire, bandaged in my t-shirt, flying on the bridge. An imaginary fin announces itself from the waters just beyond the bridge. There was no warning sign before the appearance of the bridge. The sun, like an accidental cord, reflected in my rearview mirror on the bridge. There is no merging or smoking or sinking on the bridge. Legal forms rattle in the glove compartment on the bridge. My beard is silent on the bridge. Mountains are stone trolls on the other side of the bridge. I will still need my passport on this side of the bridge. My gold watch or a wedding gift compass melts into my skin on the bridge. I take my new voice singing on the bridge. I see turtle roadkill on the bridge, pink tongues that once panted, this bridge, this bridge, this bridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Remy. So our last reader is Igor Pop Treykov, who is a renowned writer and film director from North Macedonia and a multidisciplinary international artist as well. His theoretic, journalistic, and social writings are popular and influential. He participated in such literary contests as the Viaggi di Versi and Il Mio Libro. Treykov won first place at the Day of the Poetry Poetic Contest of the literary magazine The Poet for his poem Unimaginable Spaces, and he was one of the winners for the Best Christmas Message Contest organized by American Corner Struga. He is the winner of the Best Poem Contest of Healthy Options Project Skopje and for the Day of the Fight Against Drugs, and his poem with his poem Body Double. Apologies. So please welcome Igor.
Hello, nice to meet you. And just another thing about me, maybe it will be interesting for you. I'm also working now on my second PhD. It is about the influence of the ambience of Faulkner in the film narration. First, I will read you 2 poems of mine, and then I will read you a part of my story, which I already published with you. So first poem, Dr. Flick. His particularly sophisticated style he was showing by wanting to sit completely alone in the Greek patisserie, to sip coffee, eat cake so lonely, well groomed like from magazines, the latest issue of the upper class. Neighbors stared at him at the promenade, fully made that way with leather shoes, tweed pants, with which never this one would wear woolen sweaters, all by the rules of the aristocracy. Although everything on him was worn out, the centuries bypassed him. In the previous epoch, he was with the seed of gold, for chickens with mother of pearl feathers. But it was hard here where he's from to convince everyone that only by changing lifestyles society could become rich. Everything he had was from his ancestors. For them, it was murmured they were war criminals from Germany, which in North Macedonia moved with the Parisian Conference to avoid imprisonment, perhaps death penalty. They began eating the cheap local food. Their complexion deteriorated like to all locals, not less they are all fraudulent. Thus the look spoiled, the complexion ruined, the language like for an attack raised, which easily here conceals them, since it is without special accent, made them local, like this puppy of ours, now uncle in his years, fellow citizen. However, the appearance, the perfect posture, neither too high nor too low, as well as his golden hair and bright eyes, radiated something which does not want to be from here, because here is nothing, everything, when compared with everything else that is something. However, he was always sad. Hell, what does he work? How does he make his living? They called him Dr. Flick. The second poem, Department. I was a girl, nice and little, faculty I enrolled then. How was I supposed to know a thing? That from interest I would need to do everything, to progress. My superior was allegedly professor worshipful, and in fact only fundamental was his wallet, but also that the rest he never acknowledges ever. So I concluded he and I are the same. We to those passions low are enslaved, with hairs in the ears and nose, and with unkempt sideburns, divorced 3 times, and with a nasty face. He looked at me seductively when I gave my semester paper, of which half worked for him was that's how he exploited them all. He looked at me wetly, like many others before me. It didn't matter to me. I looked at the office door. Towards the success I went, I realized. While I was sitting on it, or I was lying under it, he owned me completely. As I was thinking of my aspiring department in which the drawer was hitting. I do not care what many others before and after me had him this. When he is in me, it is when all the roses in this world bloom for me. After many years, I got that professor title, and I did not forget. All the time to the one with the nasal hairs, I was very generous. He made this department possible for me with his connections. And now the excerpt from my story, Friend. Then the time that unmistakable judge continued to pass again, with uncompromising, unstoppable tempo. The 80s arrived. I didn't know why I didn't like them. There was some economic crisis, but then I didn't know that was the worm which was eating me. There was something cruel, chilly in those winters. I knew everything around began to change on my account. I sensed some new time was arriving, which will not be the best for me. As I was speaking with her about this, my wife was telling me with frenzied laughter, "You are nuts, man. You should attend therapy sessions." Afterwards, she was giggling sweetly for a long time. Then, for the first time, I felt the fatal loneliness about which the poets are writing, actually singing. Are we indeed so lonely in the universe? We have nobody to speak with, even about the things which torment us mostly. In this period, I watched the interviews with Estée Lauder in some female transmissions on TVZ, which is Television Zagreb. She was making presentations throughout the factories. She was teaching the ship proletarians how to make themselves more beautiful. She was telling them, "Here you are with something very cruel. It shouldn't be like that. Don't put the color directly on your hair. You'll burn your head with the acid, like this." And she was demonstrating to the poor she workers how to dye their hair. She was packing the pieces of their hair with the color in packages of aluminum foil. My God, I've never seen anything like this. I know one dyes her hair by throwing color on it, as my wife does. Plus here everybody dyes their hair platinum blonde, so that they will be better paid, so that everything will be hoard. Esther was dyeing their hairs in some undefined honey nuances, which were not a lot different from the authentic color of the hairs of the she workers. To all of them, she was presenting an ounce of powder, which she was packing in that worker's gray paper for wrapping boxes. Subsequently, she was instructing them, "Look, girls, you should know this world is dangerous. I would have never had a success in my cosmetology career if everybody knew I was Jew." Later, I read somewhere that after the very productive visit she went in Vienna to her son, on a basis of what have they made a conclusion, her visit was very successful. And what did this nosy one wanted to achieve? I got a scared feeling somebody destroys the world in which I'm comfortable. I wrapped myself and covered my head. I felt very cold. Fever got me and I fell asleep as bear in winter. Yugoslavia was falling apart. Just few days after this, the television announced this, and there were demonstrations. that there will be firings, that our economy was fake with index. Immediately I went to the director. He always lets me in without any timetabling. He knows very well why. I'm not anyone. He knows that what I can do to him. I began in front of him without even sitting to murmur perplexedly. Did I do something wrong? I am asking dearly. Have I perhaps forgotten to write some report? He understood I was in panic. He placed his hand over my shoulder. Together we stopped towards the bar. Don't be afraid. Those like you loyal to the state will always be safe. Me, which state? There will be no state soon. Suddenly all wrinkles appeared on the director's forehead. His face grayed. He's not a bit aged anymore. Hours. And he gave me valentines on rocks, which I drank as water. Then he threw himself at the armchair. As he didn't sit, it was as the back of the chair inhaled him in a form of a septic, inky mouth. What am I going to do now? Where I will find myself now. Where is me now? Only 2 weeks after this meeting, Yugoslavia fell apart. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope I didn't broke the timetable. I checked this. I think I didn't.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you so much for that reading, and thanks to everyone who read. This is really amazing. So we're going to conclude with a panel style Q&A. So we have 2 questions. The first is how does your work center BEI's mission of reforging the links between art and spirit, earth, and society? I think, yeah, just go ahead and raise your hand and yeah, go ahead, Igor.
Yes, so I think art is, although if we check how much investments and finances art collects, it's really a small portion, but art is very influential and can, as we can see with this meeting of ours, can really break borders and can improve democracy, human life entirely. And because it's as they say, if you're not a king in your, it's better to be a king in your village than a beggar abroad. But I would say, on the contrary, it's better to be activist. It's always better to be also an activist abroad, because I think only art, even not journalism and media, can focus on the mistakes done by our Western civilization, because I think that the real problems are that we tolerated the things that we shouldn't, and that's why our environment and the human rights and democracy is deteriorating everywhere. And for example, many people thought it's good to trade and merchandise with China and all with all these hybrid conglomerate of countries like Russia and some Arab countries and some Middle East countries, because these countries have serious problems with the human rights, with the democracy, and it is like now we discover that some of the toys that they were merchandising with us are actually poisonous, and we are poisoning our children with them. And we knew that, for example, China was hiding that there were many children with tuberculosis, and in order to keep its reputations as a trademark, China was hiding this. And I think, and we knew about it, and we tolerated it. And look what happened in Ukraine and with all this. So I think only art can really open our eyes for these kind of real problems, not just because if you say, for example, this is, for example, like a Russian legacy. If you say, I want to save Mother Earth, I'm for ecology, this doesn't mean that you will save it and that you contributed a lot. So to do something, it's different than to speak about it, you know. And I think art can focus on this issue. Can focus.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak about how your work centers BEI's mission of reforging the links between art and spirit, earth, and go ahead, Victoria.
Yeah, so with my work itself, I believe the colors and shapes displayed as time, that helps me pay homage to the spirit, the overall universal spirit that keeps us alive and wanting to live life fully. The most essential parts of existence too in my work should be honored in ways that don't feel dictated, and it's just me as a simple observer. And I also think as I write, the poet should not write in the arrogance of living, you know, coming up with answers of their own, but simply seeing and putting words to it and how it's being perceived. And of course, like I just think anytime we write, we can't claim to be true observers of life because we don't have all of the answers, but we do have the ability to listen and watch. So I can do so in honor by like honoring the art, spirit, earth, and society by revealing what I see with all of my natural emotions towards them, whatever I am observing. And I can only do so with candor, clairvoyance, and my musicality.
I wanted to refine a little bit of what Igor was saying and some what Victoria was also contributing, just with a little anecdote. I was recently in a residency with the visual artist who shares my progressive political ideals. And she comes from a family that feels that Fox News is too liberal, right? That's how extremists to the right they are. And I asked her what she talks to her parents about, because I don't know how you have conversations with people who live in this illusion. And it kind of made me think a little bit of what Igor said about where you focus your lens and what Victoria said and how you don't let yourself be dictated. She said, I just walk in the garden with my mother, and in the garden, we can talk.
Go ahead, Ricardo.
Hi, I know we're running late, but I just want to summarize by saying that what has come out into my ears and from your readings has just been hope. That's it. Hope. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Ricardo. So would anyone else like to speak to that first question, or? All right, so our second question is, how do you feel that your work helps create pathways for peace and, you know, helps locate readers in solution and solace during these calamitous times? Go ahead, Igor. Oh, you're muted. Sorry. Emily, do you think you could unmute Igor?
Now I think I'm unmuted, but I have this ugly background, but we'll keep it a bit like this. I'll come closer so that you can see my face. For example, in my poems, I used some real historical, because I also had a research in history and civilization. And for example, a lot of war criminals came in North Macedonia. Then it was Yugoslavia, but especially in North Macedonia, because they could easily learn the language and they could easily hide because it's a mountain space. And Parisian conference, they had an agreement that war criminals should be prosecuted in the country of their origin. And they all, many of them said that they were Volksdeutscher from the Balkans, and so that they could easily get away with it. And then they had the money hidden in the Swiss banks. And then with this money, they were contributing actually to the socialist economy and then socialist Yugoslavia. And also in this way, a lot of them went in Latin America. And so it was a mess, and it's again, and the second is about the corruption in the academia, immorality, and all these people that provide us with education and with education and with the scientific research. There's a lot of corruption, and actually Bologna Convention and these new reforms in the education and research actually enlightened the bureaucratic side of the academia, of the universities. So they look at this position just as bureaucratic positions. And really people which are capable come in this position, and usually political options, when they go to election, they promise to their supporters how much positions in academia they will give. So and the story you know about, so the story you read it. So I think it is this is how it's contributing, with pointing on those things which are obvious, but nobody ever spoke about them. Only art can do it.
Thank you so much, Igor.
I think what I would add to what Igor has shared, and to kind of riff with Ricardo, is just like a reading on a Sunday afternoon like this kind of demonstrates the peace and the solace that's like at the heart of your question, like the pathways, and you know, whether it's dreamscapes or rivers or whatever geographies, or the garden, I think all of these places kind of have pathways guiding them. And I was really struck by my fellow readers and how beautifully their work, kind of the shapes of the poems kind of worked with the rhythm to kind of echo that peaceful pathway. So that's how I would answer the question, is kind of the strange divineness of Katie and Jasmine kind of bringing us together for this reading. Kind of also, there's just a lot of like connections and coincidences that kind of are kind of a through line with all the poems, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
All right, well, if anyone else would like to speak, please go ahead. Ricardo, you're unmuted. So
yeah, I just add a brief comment. I think this whole issue of reforging links between art and spirit and the earth and society really, you know, as bad as the whole pandemic was, and it has been, I think it's rekindled that spirit in many people. I have spoken to many people that I walk by, walking my dog and out on my farm, and it's amazing how much people are now paying attention to the earth. Really, we need to pay attention to that victory garden right, Elmas? And I'm thinking, you know, a few years ago, when the cathedral at Notre Dame burnt, it was just such an awful, awful disaster, right? I'm sure everybody in the world felt pain to see such a beautiful work of art. We need to feel the same way about forests burning, because that's really our chapel, nature. And I think that the infusion of what Michael has done and the whole Black Earth Institute needs to continue, because if enough people keep it up, we might just grow some stuff again.
Michael, I see you're off mute. Did you want to contribute to that?
No. I mean, I think what I find so interesting is, like I just said, that the pathway to peace involves people's exposing ambivalence, at the very least, around some of the things around them. And I think that's proper, because peace is not going to come from just ignoring things. And I'm always a little hesitant when we start this peace stuff, because I'm sort of inclined the other way, you know, onto the barricades. But I find the struggle that people have with the complexities of finding peace to be an opening to their broader involvement in the world. It's unavoidable.
Thank you, Michael. Igor?
Yes, that's. I also wanted to underline this. What is actually peace? For example, I live many times in a country for which they say it is in a peace, but actually it wasn't in a peace. It was in a form of a citizen war, you know, like integrated war between the citizens with the social injustice and corruption and everything. So no wonder many people say actually war is beautiful, because in war you have what you don't have in peace. In war you have honesty. In peace we rarely have honesty. And finally, although it's dangerous, you can really be yourself only in the war, when you don't have this hypocritical regulation which the societies are imposing on us, like they're good for our environment and I don't know, for social justice or human rights, but actually they're opposite. They just have hypocrisy, and all they do is that they're helping these big economic conglomerates, which are led with by people which have little brains in their head.
All right. Well, I think we should probably wrap up. We're we're definitely reaching the end of our time, but thanks everyone. And thank you to Emily and Michael at BEI, and I hope everyone has a wonderful last few hours of your weekend. And thank you for being with us. Take care.